I'm gonna start doing that now. Great. So we are recording this session. We'll post it on the website. And this is to allow any others that were not able to join today live to be able to access the recording as well. And yes, without further ado, we're going to kick off. So as I just mentioned, we're going to start with quick context setting behind this work. And we're going to give you an overview of where we are so far with the development of this new functionality that we're calling the IRIS Plus list. And then we're going to open up to some key questions we have for you. So most of the conversation today really is a discussion with you all. The objective of this call is to gather your feedback. And then we'll wrap up with some next steps and wrap up on the content today. So on that note, a lot of context about the importance and our focus on promoting transparency and rigor of practice, and which is informing the development of this new functionality. So as you all know, at the GIIN, we aspire to create a world in which social and environmental factors are routinely integrated into the way of making decisions and doing business, and that becoming, the normal way of doing things. And so to that end, there's three strategies, if you will, that at the GIIN we focus on. The first one is mobilizing more capital for impact investing globally. The second one is safeguarding the integrity of impact investing. And the third one is fueling the global impact investing movement to change the mindset about the role of capital in society. So the work that we do, particularly with our impact material management program and IRIS Plus, speaks to this second point here, the safeguarding the integrity of impact investing. And we do this in three ways. The first one is through standards and best practices, which is what we do with IRIS Plus. The second one is in driving impact performance, which is what we're doing also with the combination, if you will, of IRIS Plus and the GIIN's work on impact performance studies. And the third one is around driving greater transparency. And this is what the function or the objective, if you will, of this functionality we're going to talk about today, the IRIS Plus list is. So now, which I just mentioned, how we'll do this in three ways. So now if we go through each of these, so the first one on standards and best practices, since we launched IRIS Plus in May of last year, we have seen, worldwide uptake of IRIS Plus, which of course, makes us, very, happy to see, that the adoption of the norms has been, so good. We have over 11,000 unique users around the world, of which about 7,300 are organizations. And when we look at visits all throughout the world, we see that, this really not in every region of the world, we see visits and IRIS Plus use. You could say, well, this is great, but this is just a snapshot. How about, growth? And we see that, the growth of IRIS Plus continues to be consistent month over month since the beginning. So if you look at this on the left-hand side, you see a chart. These are the growth of the organizational accounts, so accounts, IRIS Plus accounts being held by organizations. And every month we continue to see consistent growth with about 18% quarterly growth. We also see growth when it comes to the regions. You look at here the graph with the colors in the middle. There is, every single region is showing growth in terms of coming to IRIS Plus. And the third one is not just about growth so much, but it's about, who is behind this growth, who is coming to IRIS Plus, who's using IRIS Plus. And really what we see here, and what I think is so encouraging, is that we see, all actors or all stakeholders across the impact investing sector. And, we see, of course, we see quite a big number of investors, about 30%. We always, the GIIN investors are our core audience, but we've been saying since the beginning of the development of IRIS Plus that really for these to, click and work, we need to have all impact investing stakeholders around the table in the same conversation. And this is what we see here with IRIS Plus use. We see enterprises, service providers and others, whether it is academics, individuals, consultants and whatnot, all using IRIS Plus. And when we look, if we did a zoom into the investors, we see that about 70% of the top asset managers, pension funds, and institutional investors, when we're looking at, by AUM, are using IRIS Plus. And also about 80% almost of all HIPSO DFIs are using IRIS Plus. So, pretty significant when it comes to, adoption and use. The second point I mentioned is, the GIIN's work in driving the understanding of impact performance. And we do this, together between IRIS Plus and our work on impact performance studies. Many of you on the line actually have heard and participated of the impact performance study that the GIIN's research team is leading. Our impact performance, our research team for the impact performance studies have established a rigorous methodology that helps, that builds on IRIS Plus core metric sets and metrics to assess aggregated performance on a sector level, with the aim of understanding whether we are making a difference towards addressing, global needs and goals, and how much of a difference we're making. So far, there has been 2 of the IPS, or the impact performance study reports published, which cover housing and clean energy. And the GIIN is publishing now in October 2 new sectors: financial inclusion and agriculture. And as you can see on the screen, there's, what we call impact performance analytics are available thanks to this work, and all of these built on IRIS metrics and core metric sets. And so this crystallizes, the importance of using standardized metrics such as IRIS Plus and the core metric sets, because they enable us to have data that can be aggregated and, with a methodology that allows for contextualization, so that we can understand, how are we doing at a sector level and pave the way towards benchmark. What is also really exciting to say, and I'll mention this, I don't know if some of you have been able to see this, we include some of these dashboards in the IRIS Plus website. You can now see them on the menu under data. You'll be able to see some of these, and a lot more of these will continue to come over the next coming months. Now, the third step that I mentioned, or the third way that I mentioned that we are driving towards, is for greater transparency. And this is something that remains a challenge. And we see that what you see here are the results from the 2020 Impact Investor survey that the GIIN conducts every year. And we see that impact washing is seen as the #1 challenge by respondents when it comes to the growth of the market. So clearly we know that something needs to be done. If we truly want to increase the effectiveness of impact investing and safeguard the integrity of practice, the market needs to have more accessible data about the profiles, about the practices of investors that are committed to create change through their capital allocation. And while there's research that shows that higher transparency leads to stronger performance, and while there is demand for higher transparency, we see that on the results of the surveys, there's still no incentive to share data. So that brings us to the IRIS Plus list, which is what we're going to be talking about today and gathering your feedback on as a way to help address this need for greater transparency. So we've been having conversations on the IRIS Plus list. It didn't have a name, so the IRIS Plus list name might sound new to you, but we've been talking about this since we launched IRIS Plus. We had one-on-one conversations with IRIS Advisory Committee members. We've had a webinar actually with former IRIS registry users back last summer. We did a number of webinars with the working group, both last year as well as early this year. And we've had a lot of one-on-one conversations, and all of these discussions have been informing the development of this functionality to really arrive to something that is going to solve your needs. And so where we are right now, we're into summer, fall of 2020, and we are aiming to publish at least a first version by the end of the year. So what have we heard from you all in this last year, or 18 months, if you will? We've heard a lot of great feedback. I guess some of what we want to share today is, some organizations have asked us to provide some sort of, stamp of approval on impact funds. Also, in earlier conversations about this functionality, investors have expressed a desire for this functionality to not just reflect the practice of investors, but also of the investees or enterprises they invest in. Organizations have always said that it would be very helpful to see the metrics that other investors, are using, as well as the different frameworks that they align to. There's been also calls for the market needing more ways to provide authentication of practice and comparability of impact performance. And then also, I guess not a surprise, but more asks for availability for access to data and results. So based on all this feedback, and that's just some snapshots of the feedback, but based on the feedback we got over the last year or so, is that we have continued to inform the development of this functionality that we're now calling the IRIS Plus list. Basically, what is this list? It would be a comprehensive online directory of investors and their investees that promotes, transparency and rigor of practice. The objective is, as we were saying, is to raise the profile of those investors who are committed to create, measure, and manage positive impact. And for who is on this list, it would be, as we said, it would be for investor organizations. So anybody, managing impact assets, whether it's fund managers, DFIs, whatnot, as well as their, investees or enterprises. So I'm going to show you just a quick mock-up on one more thing, and then we're going to start breaking into discussion. So just for you to have a mental picture, this is a mock-up, this is not what it looks like, but just for you to have a mental picture of what this could look like. So if you imagine that there's, an online directory with, different names of investor organizations and enterprises, and they could be separate. But then when you click, let's say, on investor organization, what information do you see there? And so, this is just a mock-up. And one of the key things that we want to talk with you about is, what is the information that you want to see there? What is the information that is needed to really be able to, promote transparency, and to, what information do we need from the market? What information would you want to see of your organization over others in this directory? So now, with that quick intro, we're going to start digging into our discussion questions. And we have 5 different topics, if you will. The first one is, around levels on the different list, about, how organizations, become listed, if you will, on this list. What should be in the profiles? How should we filter for information? And then a final question on verification. So first one, and now we're going to pause in each of these and allow as much time as we need for each of these. So we have, 5 questions now, 45 minutes. So really, we want to hear from you on each of these. So again, raise your hand, use the chat box, and we'll unmute you so that you can express your thoughts. But what we are imagining with the list, based on the conversations we had, is that it needs to have different levels, if you will. And so what we're proposing is that there will be 2 levels, if you will. So if you imagine, in the list, there might be a large number of organizations that are listed. If you're familiar with GuideStar, similar to GuideStar, where you can see, the names of, a number of different organizations. But then the profiles don't necessarily have a lot of information. It's up to each organization to come in and, include the details of the organization. And then that profile becomes more complete, if you will. So having this, the second level, which was the IRIS Plus profile, requires, an organization to have at least one IRIS Plus profile, and then to somehow show, their intent to create, measure, and manage positive impact. So how do we do that? We're not going to get into the specific fields, I don't think, during this conversation that will be behind there. But what we want to test with you is if these, levels, if you will, of having something that is, more passive, if you will, that we know doesn't require, you're listed in your organization, the name of your organization will be there in the list, but it's up to you to create the profile. And then when you come into the profile, what is required to be able to have a profile is that you are, in alignment with IRIS Plus, and demonstrating that through profiles and core metric sets, as well as other ways where you'll show your intent to create, measure, and manage positive impact. And then what you see also is, you see a chevron going into, 2021 and beyond, to allow to, continue to inform and develop and update this functionality based on feedback from the market. let me pause here. I think we have somebody who, I hear the line on. I don't know if somebody's trying to jump in with a comment, but let me pause here and take any of your initial feedback on this, how these two levels sound as, you know, a step to promote transparency. Does it sound right? Sounds like it's missing something? Is it clear? Any thoughts?
Hi, this is Malin from People-Centered Internet.
Hi, Malin.
And I am just suggesting a transparency maturity ladder. I don't know if you've been thinking about that, but then in 2021 and beyond, people could start to go up the ladder.
Can you expand? That sounds very interesting. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's often used in technology areas because when you've got complex interaction of different things, you
Mm-hmm.
don't try and do it based on one indicator, but you actually have a way for saying at maturity level 1 you are such and such. At maturity level 2 you have additional things and so on.
Yep. Yep, that sounds right on. Thank you. I haven't heard of that term particularly, but I like it a lot. I'm going to look that up. But yes, the idea is exactly that, and is that, you know, probably as we launch, what we imagine is that what we would have would be just profiling, you know, the organizations, and we'll get into what should be in a profile. But, you know, eventually, if we want to get into, you know, incentivizing, you know, the sharing of practice and performance and whatnot, there should be other levels that come over time as the market also is ready, but to also recognize, you know, details on practice and performance and whatnot. So that's great. Thank you. Mark, it looks clear as it is. Great. Hillary, do you want to unmute yourself? Otherwise, I can just read your comment, but feel free to just unmute your mic.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just thought I'd write it down, but I've personally been struggling with trying to get my head around how to connect asset managers and asset owners to each other, because you have a list that just says these companies do impact. Well, what kind of impact do you do? And different investors have different missions about what kind of impact they're trying to have when they put their money out into the market. So, you know, I love any place that's trying to aggregate and bring together both parties so they can find each other more easily and more efficiently.
Great. And the idea really is to be able also to give room to, you know, be transparent about goals, about, you know, intentions about practice, so that, you know, you can see the differences and understand better. So to your point, not just seeing a list, but really understanding, you know, what different organizations are doing and how are they, you know, and how are they different, how they differentiate themselves from, you know, non-impact investors, if you will, as well.
I have a question. This is Genevieve from Water Equity. For your basic list,
yes,
would you pull this from like a market scan, or would this be from contacts who've registered on the IRIS site? How would you gather? I mean, I think it's really interesting to look at that list too. So just curious how you generate that. I'm sorry if you already mentioned this.
No, we haven't. We are going into our discussion number 2, so I'll get to that in let's come to this and then we can come back to that one. So this is also another question we have for you guys, actually. So to start, what we are planning is that it will start by populating. So the list will populate all the organizations that have an IRIS Plus account, and that, again, that are investors or enterprises, and their organizations. So not for individuals, but for organizations. Now the question is, over time, would you want this list to also expand to include the whole universe of investors, so both impact and non-impact investors, and so in that way be able to differentiate yourself from the whole universe of investors, not just within, let's say, impact investors? Or is it better to just keep it to, you know, only, you know, require, you know, to be an IRIS Plus user to be part of the list? So on that, actually, I would love to take a poll between options A and B. So while you think about it, I'm going to launch the poll. This is the first time I do a poll, so let me see how we do it. Okay. There we go. So who should be included in the list? Is it only Iris Plus users or the whole universe of impact investors? Well, we have about 25% voted, so and that's pretty good. Okay, let's lock it in. So,
Leticia, I was
yes.
actually struggling. Sorry, this is Genevieve again. I was sort of looking for an option other, like
Okay.
all impact investors, which I know is like a nebulous category. But you know, including non-impact investors in there makes it a huge universe.
Yeah.
And if you're also including enterprises, which you then also include every company. So I wonder if there's a third option.
Okay, yeah, so the whole universe of impact investors, whether you have an Iris account or not, but not expanding to the whole universe of investors beyond impact. Is that what you're saying, Genevieve?
Yeah.
I wish I could throw in the dynamic poll and add the third option so people can respond, because I don't know if you all can see the results from the poll in my screen, but basically between A and B, it's pretty split, 48 and 52%. So what I would love to ask you actually, if we can use the chat box, if you would prefer this third option of being it all impact investors, so not the whole universe of investors and not just the ones that have Iris Plus accounts, but all impact investors, please use a +1 on the chat box, or a yes, and I'll start counting it. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to give you time, so keep going, and then I'll come back to the questions. We have a lot of comments on the chat box, which are excellent, and I want to go back to each of them.
Leticia, it's Caitlin from Calvert. Sorry if I missed this, but what are we defining the difference between the whole universe of impact investors and GIIN members?
Yeah, so it's not defined in any specific way, but we're thinking of, if you follow like a guide star analogy, if you will, and I don't know if everybody knows what guide star, but where pretty much, and that's for the world of nonprofits, but where they scan,
right,
kind of like every single nonprofit and throw it in there, and then it's up to you if you want to create your profile or not. So
right,
would you all want that because you want to be able to differentiate yours? And this is what you guys want and need. So do you want that because you want to be able to differentiate how you're, different from those others who are not impact minded, or that doesn't make any sense? You much rather just be, I think as Genevieve was saying, differentiate those within the impact investor pool. So it will go, yeah, I mean, the GIIN, members is still a small subset. It's not the whole universe, so it will go beyond GIIN members.
Gotcha. And I don't want to necessarily throw this wrench into this at this particular point, but I think that the conversation is leading into how do we, as in this Iris Plus directory, whoever is involved in it, how do we differentiate ourselves based on our impact management practices and our impact intent and our impact strategies, and that starts to overlap with the relatively new I never know how to say this, but the IMP plus ACT, the impact classification system, that's basically what they're doing now.
Right. So
we've got, then we have an overlap issue.
Well, so my understanding of what they were doing was different. I mean, we can have an offline conversation as well to make sure we talk about the details. But so my understanding is that is just for funds, and it's a self-classification of like the A, B, and C, or where do they fall into that spectrum, where this is supposed to be more about promoting transparency with details of both your profile of your organization as well as a lot of the details on your practice, and specifically also what metrics you're collecting. I think they stop at what frameworks or metrics to collect, and this will actually go into more of the details of what specific metrics are you collecting, and over time continue to evolve. So if you will,
Right.
it's an evolution of, if you take, the old registry and you take impact base and you take, a lot of what, we already had that was working, but not perfectly, and had, needs for other things. And so this is what also kind of playing back to what we've been hearing from the market is, okay, how do we create this functionality that responds to these needs? So I do see where, like always, there's different initiatives that do somewhat, similar things, and we need to be careful with the language to make sure that we not create more confusion. But I don't think that it is a like an overlap or the same thing. But we can.
Well, it really is, because everything that you're describing is what, at least, and I'm not affiliated with them. I've only had one conversation. I've only seen it. I'm not promoting them or anything like that. But that is what they're trying to do. They're basically trying to have your strategies mapped to the ABC, a profile, and an outline of your impact management practices. The only thing that I think it doesn't have is IRIS metrics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't. And I participated in their calls earlier on. I haven't been in one of their calls, I think, in the last few months. But yes, I do see how, for what I remember, it asks you, what different frameworks or whatever, like if you're using, if you're using GRI or whatnot, and it stops there. It doesn't get into the details of, your impact themes, your strategies, your metrics, your targets, and a lot of those. But I guess I take your point, and I will look into, I'll connect with them into the detail of what they have, so that we make sure to, work that out, so that we're not bringing something that already exists into the market.
Right. And I totally agree that the GIIN is really, the house for a lot of these things. It's where investors first go when they're learning about impact investing. It is our main resource, et cetera, et cetera. But they're, we're out in the market, and for any investors that are interested in getting into impact, they are consistently confused with how many frameworks and directories and just, different things out there. And we, as the experts, can talk to the, till the cows come home. Oh, well, these are very different. Like, you use them for different things, and it's still, that message is not really getting through. So definitely really want to be mindful about not duplicating efforts.
Yep. Nope. Point taken. And yeah, and again, like, not trying to duplicate, and this would be different. It will go into more depths of the impact management part and the, specific metrics, and then, eventually be able to connect to, impact analytics and performance, and a lot of that is enabled through, the work we do with impact performance studies. And that's why I was mentioned before. So, the pathway and the evolution of this is to be, quite different. But I understand that maybe in the first part, in the terms of like the profiling, that could be seen as similar. But okay, point taken. I will look into the details of what they have and make sure we're not duplicating something that exists. Thank you for that. Let me come back to some. We've got a lot of great comments that I want to come back to.
Meryl speaking here.
Yeah, hi Meryl.
Yes, hello. Just a few comments. I'm not sure to get all the conversation and so, but I really think like option B is very interesting, because in terms of transparency, it's better to have the whole universe. I understand that it can be a bit difficult to come to this point, but I think it's a really good goal to aim at finally. So I don't know the timing, and maybe then it's easier to start with option B. I think someone in the chat also mentioned this kind of option, and it could be better if we're talking about transparency, I guess, to have the whole universe when you don't really know about all the investor sector, impact, non-impact. It could be very interesting for people who don't know about it when they come to the IRIS Plus to discover the whole universe, and it could be really cool in this sense.
Awesome, thank you for that. Yeah, and in terms, I think I see some questions also in terms of how this would be done. There's technology that can scrape this, so it's, there are ways to, do it. But thank you for that. Belisa, I see your comment. Oh, Belisa, you're also for option B. Great to get transparency in regards to actual impact beyond intentionality. It will also make the transition easier for those who want to become impact investors and will help standardization. Thank you. And Rick, social media is really a reputable source for information on investors. Maybe I'm behind the times. I don't think we talked about social media. I think you're responding to something that somebody put on the chat box. Oh yeah, in terms of impact. Yeah, no, I think, I mean, there's technologies to scrape, and if we build this, it would be done the right way. That's true. Data scraping will only get you listed companies. So we're not focusing on the how right now. We're just focusing on the the how can be achieved. We're focusing on, like, is this the place where we want to arrive to? Do we want the whole list? And then if that's what we do, then we'll figure out how to get there. Okay, I think somebody just unmuted. If you're muted your mic to say something, please jump in. If not, let's get you muted back up. Okay, great. Let's keep moving. We have a couple more questions. So the third one, so this is, again, trying to understand a little bit more about, what kind of information you like in the profile. And what we have here is just, a mock-up, just for, if it's helpful to have a mental page, where, if you would imagine there would be some, details about, your fund or your organization, whether, let's imagine, areas, where you're based, areas where you work, where SDGs or impact themes, do you follow, or, do you, are you trying to address, impact AUM targets, and whatnot, and then get into, also, details of IMM and core metric sets and metrics and whatnot. But these, what I'm mentioning is playing back a little bit a conversation we had in March with many of you, talking about this information. But what we want to do here is actually, open up this conversation again. This is kind of like the crux of it. What is the information that is, a must-have? If you think about your organization, being profiled in this directory, what is the information that you would want the market to see from you? And how, or also, and what is the information that you want to see from others? And sorry, it seems like my word there, my bracket on the third bullet is cut by the image, but in terms of commitment to transparency. So again, line open to jump in with ideas and, what is the type, either specific information or the type of information that you would like your profile to have.
Okay, so I'm jumping in again, Meryl speaking. So I think, again, in terms of transparency, it might be very interesting to have as much information we can have on a given investor or a fund or whatsoever. Then somebody was talking about a ladder before. Maybe we can have a kind of ladder that would tell who is more transparent, and this would be led to the own decision of any investor to feed their profile with a maximum of information as well. But I mean, financial information and transparency can be seen as a must, and I think more and more people want it. So just let the possibility to put as much information as possible, I would say. Mm-hmm. But it's not, I'm not specific about what should be in or what type of information in details. But I think it can be different from a company to another, from a fund to another. So this, I don't know much. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Darren, say historical information would be helpful so that trends and rates of change can be measured. Can you tell me a little bit more when you say historical information? Are you talking about, returns? Are you talking about asset classes? What historical information would you like to see?
Well, for example, sometimes you might want to measure employment rates, levels of employment, or something related to climate change or energy usage. So you might want to know where they were before.
Oh, performance. Yeah.
Before you implemented the change, or before the venture got started, or
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I absolutely get your point. Yeah, specifically, I think when we get to, what we refer to as performance data. So if we're talking about like GSG emissions or job supported or whatnot, seeing
Yes.
the trends, that's a great point. Thank you. John Schwartz, as Jane mentioned, how the organization collects data will be important. Oh, Jane, I think I missed that from you. Jane, do you want to jump in?
Sure. Hi.
Hi.
I just think that this is all going in a great direction, and I just don't want to lose some transparency about how the data is collected, which
Yep.
might include whether the stakeholder had any say in even defining the data, like what the method was, just so people can make some assessment, and that could lend itself to the latter as well in terms of the integrity of the data collection.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that would be very relevant. So if you're comparing apples to apples, oranges to oranges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. And what would you imagine, Jane? What would be a good way of how the data should be collected? Is it?
I think just some sample categories, like was this based on the observations of the investors? Was it collecting data from primary sources from the stakeholders? Was it using mobile technology? Was it using surveillance technology? Was it using existing secondary data? So just some categories of what the data collection looked like, and importantly, some nod to what the stakeholder involvement was in the data collection.
Yep.
So we don't lose that point of view.
I love that point. I think also, I love that point. It's a very important one. But one thing I want to differentiate, just to make it clear, I think in the first, so what we are envisioning, and I like the concept of the ladder, but so the first step will be mostly, what we refer as profile information of the organization. So that would be more descriptive, if you will. I think over time, we will get to performance data. And there also we need to better understand. And so the organizational data will typically be provided just by the investor organization. So, what's your mission, your vision, what SDGs or impact themes you follow, what metrics you collect, what's your impact AUM, what areas you work on. That type of data really belongs to the investor for them to report on. I don't know that there's a lot that the investee or the stakeholders, the affected stakeholders will say about it. Once we get to maybe the how of the IMM, to your point, maybe over there we could include it, or sharing performance data. Absolutely, I think that's a really good point. But also, as much as I would love to get to performance data now, I think we also need to meet the market where it is, and there's still some, hesitancy over, sharing performance data. So hopefully, what we would love for this is for this to start promoting and making people more comfortable about sharing all that information, because it rewards those who do, and transparency rewarded, rules where transparency being rewarded, and then in that sense incentivizing more that behavior.
Yeah, maybe it could even be like a second screen or secondary. It could be optional or something in the beginning, as you're saying, meet folks where they're at, but I guess I know that this is something that you are going to get to in Iris Plus,
Yeah.
but I also am just really very aware of the variation in data collection. So
Yeah.
Also, I made one other comment about it might be helpful on the front page to profile to have them self-rate themselves as an A, B, or C investor using the IMP classification.
Yeah, I saw that note, and I think to Caitlin's point, that's also somewhere where we would need to connect with the Impact Alliance. And if that's something also they're already doing, is there a way to just communicate between these two also, so that people don't need to, report it again or whatnot? But yeah, that's a really good point. I also see, participation in other initiatives such as PRI. Caitlin, I see your comment. There was something about so Cyrus, I think there may be a few product categories of performance data, such as who are the target beneficiaries, what areas the investors are targeting to improve, what is the actual performance against them, just some thoughts. This could ensure standardization in terms of profile. Great thoughts. And yes, profiles will be standardized so that you, in the sense of, the same fields or categories of information are always available. Some people might choose to complete them or not, but so that you can compare in a consistent way. Impact indicators the company measures and manages would be helpful for promoting transparency. Great. I understood there will be self-reported data from organizations. Are you planning to control or audit the content published? That's one of the questions we're going to next. So, and I'll come back to you on that in a couple minutes. Impact Assets 50 offer similar profiles. Less on IMM might be a good reference in terms of the basic company profile. Thank you for that.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
Okay, this is John. I was wondering how you intend to collect some of the registration or basic data about the companies. Say, for instance, I know the EU Transparency has something similar to what you're talking about. So is one thing to say the company is registered, is another thing to show proof. How do you intend to collect that? And also, we need to make data collection, like one of the speakers said, you need to inform the general public how the data is collected and who stores it, how safe it is, some level of ease of mind for the person to say, okay, I want to join in this list or I don't want to be there. So we need to confirm how, at the back end, how you intend to profile this is one thing too. Then is another thing to say, okay, what information is available? How can we verify information shared? Thank you. Over.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the verification question because that just came twice, and then we'll come back to the filters. But two things. So one, before we get into the verification question, just to clarify, also the Iris Plus list wouldn't display in any information that is not, let's say, uploaded or created by the investor organization. The only thing we would include would be the name of the organization, and then that would be an empty profile, if you will, and it becomes not an empty profile once the organization goes in and decides to create a profile and complete it with their data. We would not include any data from them. It's up to each user or member, if you will, or whatever we call them, a participant in the list, a listed organization, to complete their profile. So just wanted to clarify that. And then there are some comments around SEC governance. Worldwide, there needs to be universal standards that are accessible to managers in developing markets as well. Any comments on the SEC perspective, please make sure to jump in so that we can hear those. But again, we would not be including any information on behalf of companies. This is completely for the investor organizations to share. And the fields that we're imagining are fields that have been already tested, if you will. A lot of this information was already in, impact-based or, an IRIS registry or whatnot. But I guess what we wanted to use this question about what information you want there is to see if there are any other things that, have not been included before that are critical for you to be on this list. So when you imagine your organization, being listed, you want to make sure that people see this from you so that they, because that helps differentiate your practice and advance transparency. That's what the aim of the question was. Let's go to verifications, as this has come up quite a bit. I guess the question here for you, as is what is the threshold for verifying information? So, the information here, again, when we're talking about at least in the first level, when we're talking about just the profile of the organization. So here we're talking about, a description of the organization, their goals, SDGs, themes, impact metrics, core metric sets they're aligned to, geographic areas of focus, asset classes, whatnot. Do you feel like that information needs to be verified? Or is it okay to have it as self-reported? And if verification is a must, what type of information should be verified? There's, if we're talking about, profile information, again, profile information being descriptive about the organization, things we talked about, versus performance data. So if I'm going to start including my GSG emissions or my number of jobs per body, so anything that happens kind of like, you know, as a result of my intervention or my investment, or, you know, beyond the walls of my organization, let's say that's performance, versus profile, which is more like organizational descriptive information. So I have a poll for this too, but I'd love to first open to thoughts, reactions, and questions on verification. Is it, you know, as long as we say, for example, this information is self-reported, is that okay? Or should we go further than that and require some sort of verification? And if so, you know, what kind?
This is Maylin, and I put it in the chat. I think for those that self-reported but are able to give third-party sources for verification, this way, if somebody really wants to check, they can go to the third party to confirm it. And that is valuable. So depending on how much of the information can be verified by third parties,
Mm-hmm.
that would show them higher up in the maturity ladder.
Great, thank you. And so you could have, so if you are, so let's say if you are, so for example, something that I'm thinking about, you know, they are, you know, for example, the OPIM, right? And, you know, the operating principles for impact management, there's been, you know, disclosure statements and more organizations also coming to, you know, provide verification services and whatnot. So for example, saying, you know, this organization has been verified by, you know, a third party, does that give you all more confidence, I guess, on when you're reading, you know, the profile of an organization?
The third party needs to be named and
Mm-hmm.
reachable, not just verified by third party.
So that it would be, you know, this third party verify this information.
Yes.
Okay.
But excuse me, but can it be also like still Mary speaking? Sorry, can it be also like a bit like a Facebook account? I would say anybody can create a Facebook account, so anybody could create a profile more or less with more or less information. But then you have the possibility to make your account verified by the platform, and I think also all the GIIN and IRIS system could be. A trust platform that could tell if the information is really verified or not, and I think that like this it would be interesting also, because it let the people who put the information to be as transparent and accurate as they want to, and then people who are looking at this platform can say, okay, I trust this one or not this one, but it's a bit more natural, organic, I would say. But the platform in itself would be a frame for going from a blank profile toward a more complete, trustable profile also. And there would be a kind of gradation like that. That's it.
So can I get your name? I just want to write down to make sure.
Yeah, that was Meryl.
Meryl. Oh, Meryl again. Excellent. Thank you. And Meryl, on the point of verification, what are you thinking?
You mean on the pool of verification?
Mm-hmm. On the point, yeah, on data being verified, needs to be verified, maybe.
Yeah, it has to be verified somehow, but maybe the
Mm-hmm.
company will be able to complete its profile, and maybe it has the option afterward, if it wants to go further, to ask for verification, and I mean to attest that the data is accurate, it has been verified, and then there could be a kind of trust cursor toward a profile, maybe.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Yes, and I think Caitlin and Rick, to your point, yeah, we fully acknowledge there are other parties already doing verification. So we are not, this is not that we're proposing that we will be doing this, but whether it is necessary to bring it in or partner in and somehow allow to show that, or whether it's not needed. I'd love to actually do a quick poll on this. I have, although let me see if I can do my poll here. So the poll is, so we have a lot of voices, but there's a lot more people on the line that the voices we had. So I would love to hear everybody. So the verification, so the information on the list, whether it has to be verified. So is it a must have? Is it a nice to have? Is it not needed? Just state that the info is self-reported, that's been cut, or I'm not sure. I don't know about this question yet. It looks like people are still voting. So, okay, let's close it. So we have about 41% of people said yes, it's a must have, 37% maybe. So those are pretty close. And then 26% said no, and 4 said, I don't know. Awesome. One final question and then final comments on your guys' ends. The other thing, so this is more about filtering. I mean, I guess this is not that big of a question, but when you're looking or searching for, let's say, funds on the list, you know, what are important filters for you to be able to filter these, you know, different organizations and find them? Is it by, for example, geography of focus? Is it by, you know, impact themes or SDGs? Is it by asset class? Or what are other, you know, key, you know, factors or elements, if you will, that you want to be able to search through to be able to find organizations? Geography and SDG. And actually I have one more poll on this one. So let's do the poll. I can get all your questions there. Direct versus indirect. Okay, thank you, Caitlin. Oh, great. Wow. So impact themes. And again, this could be all of them. So just so you know, these are not, they're not exclusive. Something getting our experience. Oh, that's a good one. It's the first time. Yes, mailing. I should have a fourth quiz option that is all. This is my first time polling, and I'm definitely not an expert poller. So, but point taken. Thank you for the feedback. Oh, but the poll lets you select them all. So thanks, Hillary. AUM. Awesome. Great. Let's lock it in, lock the results. So SDGs, it's the first one at 85%, geography of focus and asset class with about 50% each, so both those being important. And then we got also comments on a few others. Diversity of fund managers and investments, AUM, experience, and direct or indirect strategy. Excellent. So I know we are almost at time, but we do have a couple more minutes. I just want to open the line for any other thoughts, reactions, ideas.
Hello.
Yes, Vanessa, we can hear you.
Hi. Hi, Leticia. I just want to make a few comments. I am from Honduras, and I was looking at the indicators on mitigating climate change to agriculture. And when I look at the indicators, I believe, I live firsthand in my country the consequences of climate change. But what I would like to see more, if possible, would be more social economic indicators, because once we take care of people living in poverty, they will stop cutting the trees, they will start cutting the rainforest. And I am also doing a research paper for University of Cambridge. What I understand is that climate change will have the potential to actually further marginalize small producers. So it would be only possible for the rich, affluent producers to actually cope up with the changes that are coming, and I didn't see many socioeconomic indicators, and that's something that I think it needs to be done. That's pretty much I wanted to. And one more thing I wanted to add is that we need to police, the claims that the companies are making, because, as for example, in the coffee industry, there are so many claims about sustainability and fair trade. But if you look at it, most of the farmers today living below the poverty line, and the prices of coffee and commodities are going down, so people can sustain a dignified standard of living, let alone pay for technologies to enhance the farms and so on. So there must be a policing, and there must be more social indicators to actually achieve the goals that we want. And that's my contribution.
Excellent. Thank you, Vanessa. And I think you are in contact already with my colleague, Lisa Glasgow, who leads all our Navigating Impact Project work. And she can talk offline with you about the indicators. Thank you for your comments. And yeah, and I think in terms of the policing, I mean, the aim behind this is really to help improve, transparency. It is a huge need in the market. We hear about it all the time. And so this is why we're trying to address this need and gather your feedback to provide it in a way that it is helpful to you all. But I know we're at time and actually past a minute, and I do want to respect everybody's time. So thank you all very, very much for your great feedback and ideas and comments. We took note of everything. We recorded the session. We'll come back to you with an iterated version based on all your feedback, probably in about a month or so. Thank you very much.